Accelerate Alaska, exploring the economic opportunities to unlock a greater future. This podcast sponsored by FindPoint. Don't let advances in marketing technology get ahead of you. Get a free marketing analysis on your digital marketing efforts. Go to findpt.com. That's FINEPT.com.
I think it's important to start local, but think global when you want to build an innovation stuff. There's nothing wrong in innovating for yourself. Hopefully, your innovation is globally applicable, because then you can impact more people.
What is the major difference between adversity and opportunity? It's mindset. Those who face adversity believe that their future is dependent on events outside their control. Those who welcome opportunity know that their future is dependent on the actions that they take now. In 2008, Iceland's banking collapse was the largest experienced by any country in economic history. Its three largest banks defaulted on $62 billion of foreign debt. And it was a country with less than 400,000 people. While most people would call this adversity, Bala Kamallakharan made this into an opportunity to help remake Iceland's economy. He was our keynote on Day 2 of Accelerate Alaska 2019.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Ross. And Ross says, hey, come and share your story about Iceland and Startup Iceland and everything that you've been doing there. And he didn't give me any more context. So I pinged him and said, what do you want me to talk about? He said, hey, talk about the lessons learned. What's happened in Iceland since this collapse? And then, by the way, it was more than 62 billion euros. It was close to 200 billion euros. So it was a little bit of a slight problem. All right, so briefly, 2008 was the collapse. 2009 to 11 was chaos. And 2012 to now, we're trying to organize and get out of this problem that started. And we had some wins from the year 2013. And I think that kind of made a lot of difference. This guy, he's the reason I actually moved to Iceland, other than my wife. He is the CEO of the bank. You can see the word behind it. It's called Glitnir, or Íslandsbanki. He hired me, and this was the first 6 months result. I joined in February of 2006 into the CEO's office. I was part of strategy and all kinds of fun things that the bank did. So we made a profit of 235 million euros the first 6 months. A return on equity of about 45%. It's pretty good. Pretty cool. I thought, we're doing something awesome, building a great company. So that's me signing a deal in India, and I was appointed as the head of the bank. And the people who are standing behind me are the finance ministers of India, the finance minister of Iceland, the chairman of the Confederation of Industries. I mean, this is a big deal. So the Confederation of Indian Industries has about 500,000 companies as members. So the scale is a little bit big in India. And the ambassador to Iceland and Norway. I was 35. I was the head of the bank in India. I was having lunch and dinners with finance ministers and CFOs of Goldman Sachs and Citigroup and every other big major Wall Street bank. And I was looking at myself saying, you know what? I did okay. For a kid out of Chennai, that's not bad. Life's done. I'm going to drink good wine, eat great food, play golf, get fat, and die. Nothing wrong in that. That was me in 2007 and 2008. And you can see there are no gray hairs. All this happened with the startup thingy, so I'll share more about that. So this happened in 2008. It was quite something. And literally all banks defaulted in Iceland. They all went. Banks don't go bankrupt. They just become illiquid, and there's no money to run the bank. And the Central Bank of Iceland just didn't have any foreign currency to bail out any of the banks. So they promptly fired everybody who was not in Iceland. And by the way, I was in Mumbai at that time, and I felt like I was in some kind of a twilight zone because every phone number I called, nobody picked up the phone in Iceland. That was strange. I actually came back. This was happening. When I moved to Iceland, everybody said Iceland was this peaceful country. And there was a revolution on the streets. And I was like, well, what's going on here? Of all the time in the world I pick to move to a country, and I pick a time and there's a revolution? That's crazy. I'd been to Iceland since the year 2000. Why didn't I come earlier? Or maybe don't come at all. Anyway, there were burning stuff on the streets. So this is actual real picture that was happening in the city of Reykjavik. And as I said, promptly everybody in the bank, all the executives were fired. So one day I'm having lunch with the finance minister. Next day I'm thinking about, how am I going to pay bills now? I don't have a job. Right? It's actually a great picture taken by a good friend of mine. He's a co-founder of this company called Guide to Iceland. That's him. He just takes stunning pictures. I was going to say that was me looking at this big mountain of challenge just to frame some problem. So I had no idea what to do. I'd never been fired in my life. And I thought, I have 3 masters. I was working on my PhD in economics. I can get a job. Nah. Didn't work. Literally, nobody would hire me in Iceland. And so I decided maybe I should, make my own job. By the way, while I was thinking about making my own job, do you guys know what this is? This is the volcano Eyjafjallajökull. And by the way, no journalist could pronounce that. That was by far the best thing that happened to Iceland. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. Seriously. The fact that nobody could pronounce that word on TV made it a viral sensation. Okay? Everybody in the world suddenly realized there is this country called Iceland, and it has a volcano, and by the way, it basically stopped all airlines from flying in Europe. Right? And of course, a lot of people were very pissed because they were all stranded in airports. This happened, and this was March, April 2010. So that's me with this company called Clara, where I invested all the money that I could muster from my family back in India. So I couldn't get a job, and being a triple master's PhD economics student, I did what any respectful PhD student does. I crawled to my family and I begged them to give me some money so I could become an investor. And my cousin, who was an entrepreneur himself, was a very successful entrepreneur back in India. He said, sure, I'll give you some money. So he gave me, around $500,000. And the untold agreement was, if I lose it, I should bother not coming back to India. Right? So he said, do whatever you want. And then he looked at me and said, but if you lose it, that's okay too. No, it wasn't okay. It was not okay. So I did, again, what PhD economics major who studied all this portfolio theories and all this elegant mathematics of how to allocate money. I took all this money and I invested in this one company. Went all in. Yeah. So now you know why all the gray hairs. Right? So I invested in this company, and they were building software. It was a natural language processing engine. It read all online forums and basically did sentiment analysis. I thought the software was pretty nifty. And I said, this is pretty cool. So I invested in it. I sat with the team. And because of my relationship in the bank, I was able to get the president to come and visit this team because I was trying to create this aura of innovation in Iceland. I mean, literally, there were a handful of companies, right? There was not a lot of things going on at that time. And if you are an investor in Iceland at that time, you were either a crook or somebody who just was not somebody to be associated with. I didn't know about all that because, as you can see, I'm not an Icelander. I don't speak that language very well, and I didn't read newspapers. I didn't look at the news. So it was interesting times. This volcano went off in 2011, and it was fantastic because all the photographers were coming to Iceland, and this was the year when Instagram and Facebook was just booming. So almost every picture that anybody was sharing, any professional photographer, was from Iceland. So that was great marketing. First, the volcano goes off. Nobody can pronounce this word, and everybody knows about this place, and then everybody starts sharing pictures of Iceland. So that was great. So I invested in this company, and they had no customers. And of course, I'd been a management consultant before, and I used to work for a bank, and I helped the team gain some customers. So we went from making $0 in revenue to making about $20,000 a month in recurring revenue. And I thought, hey, I should now be able to convince investors in Iceland to go invest with me. And I went and met all these people that I knew who, from my banking days, were all investors. And they were all very polite and said, you're crazy. We won't touch this with a 1,000-foot pole. Please leave my office before I call security. So that was, again, a very rude awakening. So I had a lot of time to think, and I was thinking, so what was missing at that time in Iceland? As you can see, when I invested in this company, word got around that this crazy Indian was investing in Iceland. So every founder wanted to meet me. And I met every founder. I was just curious because what these people were doing. I met all of them, and they would pitch. Their pitch text was in Icelandic. And I was like, doesn't work. I mean, startups in a country that has 300,000 people just for Iceland just makes no sense. So it has to be in English. So they were not thinking globally. So that was one big, I want to say, my contribution. There was no community to support founders. People were all sitting in their own corners doing their own things. Every founder would come to me and tell me that they have this huge problem. And then the next guy would come and the next girl would come and they would say the same things everybody thought was the problem. And I was like, why don't you all talk to each other? Why are you coming and talking to me? The truth was everybody thought it was money. Everybody thought that money could solve all problems. And I was like, not true, really. At least at that stage. There was no professional seed, angel, or VC funding. There was one VC firm funded by the Icelandic government. It's called Nýsköpunarsjóður, NSA.is. That's their name. They hate the branding, but guess what? And there was no mentoring or teaching entrepreneurship or anything like that going on. And last but not least, none of these founders had any networks outside of Iceland. These were the things that were missing. And I said, okay, I got to do something to fix this problem. So I did what any triple master's, PhD in economics would do. I went to Google and I started searching, looking for all kinds of things. And then I bumped into this. And they were talking about mentorship. They were talking about money. They were talking about acceleration. They were talking about all these things. That was like music to my ears. Like, yes, this is exactly what we should do in Iceland. And sure enough, I started reading more and digging into this. And then I bumped into this guy, Brad Feld. And he was sharing everything about this whole venture business. Because I knew nothing about venture business. As I said, I'd invested $500,000 in one company. And I didn't know how to do follow-on funding. I had no network. I didn't know any investor at that time. But this guy was like so open. He was just, blogging about everything to do with startups and venture. And then he wrote this blog post. about the fact that he was going to write this book called Startup Communities and how to build one in your city. And I was like, that's what I want to do in Iceland. So I wrote to him. So he said, email me 500 to 1,000 words. If you are a leader in your entrepreneurial community, I read that as if you're desperate, email me. Leader was not the word that I would use. I was just desperate. And so I emailed him. While I was reading Brad's blog, and I bumped into Fred Wilson's blog and a lot of these blogs, and I said, if you're an investor, you write a blog. So I started a blog. I didn't have much to say, but I had a blog. So I actually wrote a letter to Brad, and I published it in my blog as an open letter to Brad. And, as you can see, if you're good in reading between the lines, when you read this, you will see the desperation in my voice. Please help me. I have no idea what I'm doing here. So Brad responded right away. And he said, so tell me this again. You are an Indian living in Iceland. You took money from your family in India and invested all of it in one tech company, which, by the way, is probably going to go bust. And you want to build a community to help founders? Really? That makes no sense. But it's very inspiring. I'm very inspired by what you're trying to do. It's crazy, but it's inspiring. And I said, yeah, it's crazy, but I think there's a lot of this entrepreneurial spirit. And he said, I want to help. What can I do? And I said, can you please come down here? Because when I tell that, you should invest in this innovation thing, people look at me like I've gone crazy. And by the way, I have no credibility to say anything. But if you come and say that, maybe people will listen. And he said, sure, I'll come. So that's how Startup Iceland, the conference, was born. By the way, I've never done an event before. I hardly even invite people over home. So it was pretty much learning by the fire, putting an event together. So that's why when Ross asked me to come, I immediately said yes. And I bought some gift because I only knew Ross. And I always give gifts to anybody who puts events together and brings community together because it's a thankless job. Nobody thanks them. End of the day, I think we all should give Ross a round of applause. It's not easy. Believe me, I know everything that he's going through. I've done it for 9 years now. So, say, gray hairs. So I went to the president and I pitched him the idea. And he said, sure, I'll help. What can I do? I said, open the event for me. He said, sure, I'll open the event. And he did one thing more. He said, because this is the first event you're hosting, I'll invite 50 of your guests to the White House. So the evening before the event, bring all of them to the Icelandic White House, and I'll do a small reception, and I'll invite them all. And suddenly all these people who were coming thought that I was somebody respectable. I was like, great, thank you very much. I love it. So he's a great friend now, and he still talks fondly of those days. Not only that, so this is the U.S. ambassador to Iceland, Ambassador Ariega. I got him to give me or write the first sponsorship check for Startup Iceland, $4,864.70. I remember that number because putting an event together, you need money. So anyway, long story, and then I can share more of the stories. I'm going to be here the whole time. He wrote me the first check, and Brad Burnham from Union Square Ventures, he came as well. So we hosted the first event. And this is in the year 2015. Malik and Brad came, and that's Ingrid Vanderveld. And we started giving prizes for hackathons and things to help founders. So this is the founder of Wow Air in the year 2018. As you can see, his talk was about the future is now. He was just talking about how he had just sold for $1 billion. And this was him in the year 2019 talking about the collapse of Wow Air and how he screwed up. So Startup Iceland is that place where founders come and connect with their tribe and share openly success and failure. So it became a platform for founders. So we've done it for 8 years now. Next year would be the 9th year. It created a platform for founders to have a voice. So we also brought the government and everybody involved. It also opened the eyes of the world to Iceland, the innovation, the creativity, and technology that was going on, which is pretty cool. And I was just telling somebody outside, I was probably the first guy to blog about Icelandic innovation in English. No jokes, seriously. I even won Journalist of the Year award. I'm not kidding. Okay, when they gave me the award, I said, I'm not a journalist. They said, well, you seem to be the only one writing about it, so here you go. So Startup Iceland started a lot of things. It started an accelerator called Startup Reykjavik. It started another accelerator called Startup Energy Reykjavik. It started a third accelerator called Startup Tourism. And the fourth accelerator that just started now called Firestarter, which is a music-related accelerator. By the way, the company that I invested in, Clara, 2013, exactly 3 years to the date, May 1st, that company was acquired by a NASDAQ-listed company called Jive for $10 million. So my family, thank you. As I said, my family allowed me to come back to India, so that's always good. And you can see every year since the year 2013, there was one exit from an Icelandic company that started. And as you can see, also the size of the exits have been going up. In 2018, CCP, one of the largest game companies, was acquired for $425 million. It's almost $500 million. So that's meaningful. So this is a river. The river is coming into, like aerial photograph. Again, my friend Yuri takes these pictures, just beautiful pictures. And these are all some selected funding that has happened to Icelandic companies. And Guide to Iceland is one of my big investments that Brad was talking about. We raised $20 million, valuing that business at over $100 million. It's still growing. It'll be $1 billion company in the next 3 to 5 years. And you need to have funding, right? So, again, great picture of the ice cave. So this is a timeline of what has happened in Iceland. This was put together by Einar Gunnar. He's an entrepreneur resident in Arionbanki, which runs the accelerators. So 2010, if you look at it, there was literally nothing. And you can see for yourself. 2010 to 2018, 2019, there is like a bunch of things going on in Iceland. Like tremendous activity that Brad was talking about. So again, you can share the pictures. So this is the beautiful Harpa. So my last slide. So what are the lessons learned the last 7-8 years? I think it's important to start local, but think global when you want to build an innovation stuff. There's nothing wrong in innovating for yourself. Hopefully, your innovation is globally applicable, because then you can impact more people. People always talk about unicorns. I mean, a company that is valued $1 billion or more. And I ask the question, how do you build a $1 billion company? And I say, okay, if you can impact the lives of 1 billion people and charge them $1 for it, you have a $1 billion company. So that's what I mean by a startup. Success stories are very important. Brad was talking about 3 exits. As you can see in Iceland, the reason why the entire community, all the way from the president, the government, everybody is now rooting for this innovation economy is because we have seen some wins. We have gotten lucky. But we worked hard to get there. You can't just bet on luck. You just have to work hard. And you know the saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Seems to resonate. I don't know how. No fear of failure. No idea is crazy. Nobody's trying to do anything stupid. There's no stupid things. People try to do things that they think is valuable. So encourage that. If they fail, that's okay. Like I was talking about Wow Air. I would involve the entire community, right? What I mean by the entire community is all the way from the president down to the cab driver. Not that cab drivers are less in hierarchy in Iceland, If you live there, you know there is no hierarchy there. Everybody is pretty egalitarian and equal, and open to anyone willing to come and contribute. I mean, look at me. I don't look Icelandic. I'm an Icelander now. I have a passport. I'm a citizen now, but the country allowed me to take charge and build something, and they encouraged me from doing stuff. That's pretty cool. And funding matters a lot. Last but not least, I think we underestimate the power of give first. I had no big ambition when I started this. I just wanted to create a platform for founders one day that we will cherish, encourage founders to come together, to inspire, to educate, to connect and build things. It's created a fantastic movement in Iceland. So I'm really happy about that. So that wouldn't have happened if I had not done what I did, which was I did something without any expectation for myself. That's what give is. You give something without expecting anything back. And then, by the way, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but that's what I did, really. I just did it. At that time, a lot of Icelanders would ask me, why are you doing this? What's in it for you? And I said, nothing in it for me. It's good for the community. It's good for everybody. So somebody has to do it. So I choose to do it. And I think every one of you here can do that, right? You don't have to do an event, but you can mentor. Find a founder. How many of you are founders here? Great. So one of you who's not a founder, find a founder and be their mentor. And by the way, being mentor is just listening. Nothing else. Seriously, nothing else. You don't have to be an expert. So that's kind of it. I can ramble on, and my wife tells me I should shut up more. So I will stop now, and I'm going to be hanging around the whole day. So if anybody wants to come and chat, more than happy to share what I do. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Do you enjoy this podcast? If so, go to accelerateak.com to find out how you can contribute, volunteer, or even bring an Accelerate conference to your town. accelerateak.com. This has been an Accelerate LLC production. The future is already here, if you know where to look.